Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this panel on the lives of men from the global majority, a glimpse into Black and brown male perspectives. I'm your host, Philip Butler. This will be not only a life-giving conversation to us, but something that you all can glean from as you all are watching this panel, take place. In the words of Jesus Nice and the Kid Mero, we have a slew of illustrious guests. Each and every one of these gentlemen are going to be able to tell you more about themselves, and you'll be able to see just how amazing each and every one of them are. And then we're going to just kind of jump into a kind of a round table discussion with a few set of questions that we have pre-planned. And so just kind of sit back, relax, and take it all in as we, kind of bring ourselves to the table. And so with the first question is going to serve as our way of getting to know everyone. And so we won't pick anybody. We'll just kind of let folks kind of come to the surface. But the first question is, who are you? Who are you, gentlemen? And who's with us today?
That's a deep question there. I'll go first. I'm just going to open my mouth and see what comes out. But so my name is Percy Ray Ballard. Born, raised for the most part in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I'm at right now. I was brought up in a big family. Mom had 10 siblings, and so a bunch of cousins, a bunch of family, which is a real makeup of who I am. Was eager to get out of Nashville. When I was younger, just because of some racial dynamics that were there in the late 90s, and went to California for college, Boston for medical school. I'm trained as a psychiatrist and encountered IFS during psychiatry residency, which was very life-changing, very helpful thing. Another thing that has been very impactful in my life has been meditation, non-dual meditation. Mahamudra and Dzogchen is what I was introduced to, and those have remained very life-changing practices for me and very, very helpful. Yeah, I guess that'll be just a little bit of an introduction. I'm sure there's always more that we'll get to know about each other, but I'll start with that.
Awesome, thanks, Percy. Which one of you gentlemen wants to go next?
So I'm Ty Kuttner. I am an image coach. I'm also a relationship coach. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So that's where I'm from. My mom was 19 when she'd had me. My father was killed before I was born. And I was raised partially by my mom until I was around 5, and then my grandfather until I was around 9. And I went back to my mom at 9, and my mom passed away when I was 15. And I went back to my grandfather. And so being in Brooklyn, New York, one of the things that my mom taught me, she instilled a lot in me, making me feel like I was someone who was significant, someone who was different, special, all these things. And when she passed away, a part of me had to make that the truth, right? Had to live that truth. So I went through my 20s kind of just, trying to be somebody. And I became an entrepreneur in my early 20s. That led me to, trying to make something more of myself. And I was in a relationship for some time when I was in my 20s, had a son at 28. That relationship went south. And while going through the betrayal situation of that relationship, I discovered something about myself. And I discovered I was letting myself go for a long time. And the one way I did improve myself was I improved how I was dressing, and I learned I learned the skills of dressing well. And I used those skills to improve my career, and it did, immediately, also improve the way I see myself, how I was presenting myself. And I started to help my friends. They started to change, transform their lives instantly. And that's when I became an image coach, right? I was teaching them something they couldn't learn anywhere else. In the midst of me creating that business, I met a friend of mine who was in a bad relationship himself, got out of it and created a training, or was creating a business to help guys to avoid that from happening again. And for the past, and this is 10 years ago, this all happened, or 7, 8 years ago, the betrayal happened for me. And I've been working for this friend for 2 years. So I've spoken to thousands of guys at this point who are going through relationship issues, divorce, separation, cheating, things like that. And I help them enroll them into a program that helps get themselves back to themselves. I was introduced to IFS through Duran Young, friendship that we've developed. At the first BTR training, Black Therapist Rock training, I was on the staff of BTR. So I was there in Silver Springs in that first level 1 training, and I got in a behind the scenes look at how the training was coming together. And February, I got my first level 1. I did my first level 1 training. Now, most people will say, your first. Yeah, I'm doing level 1 again. I'm also part of the fellowship, the IFS Institute Fellowship. So I'm doing level 1 again, and I just completed level 2. So there's going to be more about me, of course, but that's who I am. We'll leave it there.
My name is Femi Olukoya. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I was born and raised in Houston. My original background is West African. I'm Nigerian. So first generation Nigerian. I got sent home when I was 8 because I was a bad kid. Lived with my grandparents in Nigeria for about 6 years, came back, and I had a hard time assimilating back into high school and, meshing with my mom and, her new husband. So it was a difficult, adolescent time frame for me. So I jumped into the military right out of high school because I just wanted to get away. I wasn't getting that much emotional support. With that being said, my dad was never in the picture. So got into the military, joined the military at 17, 2001. And I thought it was going to be cake. I thought I was going to Hawaii. There was nothing happening. And right when I graduated from boot camp, that morning was September 11th, 2001. 18, getting out of boot camp. They changed my orders from Hawaii to the Gulf immediately, right? So instead of, they sent us to the aircraft carrier, USS Nimitz. It was like a movie. Like they put my Navy hat on and our officer ran in during the ceremony and said, "We're at war," and turned on the TV. As he turned on the TV, that second plane was hitting the second building in real time. So there's a lot that I had to take in, and my life was going to change. So I was in the military. That's what it was. I was in the Gulf for 5-6 years, back and forth out to sea. And I was a search and rescue swimmer, and I was a boatswain's mate, which is the deck department. We navigate the ship. And a lot of my shipmates were jumping off the bow because it can handle being out to sea that long, So there was a lot of suicide attempts. And being a part of a SAR swimming team, we go in there, we get them out, and we debrief with them, like, "Why are you doing this? What's going on? Talk to me." And after that, we send them to the ship's chaplain. I did that for 5 years. So dealing with suicidal, or some of them did jump off by mistake, but most of them were suicidal attempts, a lot of battle stations. So that was what intrigued me into mental health and helping my shipmates kind of like transition from military mindset to like the civilian world, which is very difficult for a lot of us. I've been in mental health for about 12 years as a psychiatric assistant, psychiatric coordinator, and then the last 6 years, I've been a therapist. So now I own a couple of my practices, and I'm just trying to push mental health, as a whole to communities of individuals that look like me, right? IFS really, really, really opened my eyes into different ways of modalities, collaborating with, psychedelics. Duran Young really opened my mind to like a lot of opportunities that I can actually be able to practice an array of mental health modalities with IFS, psychedelics, and other things as well. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Father of 4. It's a full house most of the time. So that's really where I'm at right now.
My name is Victor Cabral, and I currently serve as the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for Fluence Training, which is a company that focuses on training clinicians in psychedelic-assisted therapy and psychedelic harm reduction and integration therapy. And in addition to that, I'm also a licensed social worker and practicing therapist. I'm trained in psychedelic-assisted therapy, IFS, currently enrolled in the Gestalt Institute of Philadelphia. And And yeah, I guess in addition to all my titles and the work that I do, I'm also a culture creator. So I'm heavily involved in the psychedelic space with everything from creating art and bringing Black and brown voices to the space, to being a trainer, developing curriculum, and also being a voice in the policy space with regard to like legislation and policies and regulatory issues.
Greetings, greetings. I just want to first acknowledge the fact that I'm just so glad and so appreciative to be in this space and to just have this moment, right? I'm very cognizant of moments, you know, the opportunities that we have on this plane of life. So I just wanted to really acknowledge this moment that we are able to capitalize on here. I'm Dane Ray, and I guess we'll rewind back to the 80s. I was born in Philadelphia, and I was raised in Delaware until I was 12, and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. So if you can say anything about my life, I'm pretty East Coast strong. In vernacular, and the way I talk, the way I code switch really started developing around the age of 4, and being able to step in and out of cultures. I have a lineage, a full lineage from Guinea, West Africa, and I'm also married. My wife is also biracial and West African, so that's a big part of our culture as well. And so it's kind of shaping kind of the communities that I intersect with and how I developed as a person. On my formative years, one of the biggest things that shaped me was testing around my development. When I was 4, I went to DuPont in Delaware, and I got tested with ADHD and visual perception deficiency. And from that point up until, I'd even say till college, I was met with hurdle after hurdle and having to fight for accommodations there was like a disconnect. There was like a distance between my actual innate intellect and capability and the support. So I always had this struggle of making the greatness show. And that caused a lot of distance and self-hate within myself. So a lot of my story and a lot of my struggle has been struggling along with the education system. So to be here now in full-fledged middle age or adulthood, and to have letters behind my name is a very interesting part of my journey, because you usually don't see the people who were in special ed, who struggle with grades, who did not have support, who were other than that kind of way being and having the opportunities that I've had. So I consider the journey itself and the struggle itself a privilege to be able to grapple with what I had to learn, what I had to grow, and the muscles I had to develop to come to this point. So after I got the degrees, my final degree that I received was from University of the District of Columbia. So I have had the unique experience of both going to PWIs as well as HBCUs. I attended Lincoln University. I also attended UDC as well as Birmingham Southern in Alabama. I got married in 2015. In 2020, had my first child, and that really has changed my life. We talk about negotiating, we talk about adjustment. That has been the biggest adjustment of my life. And right after I had the baby was when I had my first experience with IFS, and that was a game changer. To be able to have language, something tactile, to be able to follow, to be able to get access to the parts that you felt were neglected, the parts that you couldn't ever bring back into congruence, the parts that you really weren't able to align with, and be able to have language to like parse those things out has been extremely helpful to my own journey. So when I talk about who I am, Dane Ray, I'm bringing my grandparents with me. I'm bringing my ancestors with me, because the fight that I've had during this snippet of life is an indication of how far they had brought me. And so I really can't sit here by myself. I'm sitting with a multitude of the people who made this possible. So as we're going through this discussion, this platform today, I hope that I can create room for them to speak as well.
No, that's what's up. Thank you, gentlemen. Last but not least, I'm Philip Butler. I am a professor at IFS School of Theology. My areas of concentration are neuroscience, technology, spirituality, and blackness. I lead an artificial intelligence institute at my school, and I'm the founder of the Secret Project, distinctly Black conversational AI with mental health capacities. And its primary modality is IFS. I am a father of two. I grew up 20 minutes north of DC, and so you can sound from the DMV, even though I was born in Jersey. But I've kind of done my own space around the country. I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in LA, and I now reside in Denver. And yeah, I was first introduced to the model in 2013, and similar to the rest of the gentlemen on this panel, it was a life-changing thing. And we'll get into this later, but you know, it helped save my marriage in many ways, and it helped kind of save me as well in terms of shifting the way not only that I relate to myself, but the way that I was able to hold myself in the world. And so yeah, I put a pin in it for now, and we'll just take this moment to actually kind of transition into the next question, because the first question was, who are you? But the second question is a little more nuanced in the sense that we're asking these gentlemen how you like to be seen, right? If that's different from, or in addition to, right, who you are. Like, given what you said about yourself, how do you like to be seen in the world?
That's a tricky one.
You're coming with the real questions here.
Yeah, like you just off the bat. So this has been following. It's funny that it just came up for me. It's been following me since I've been a child. Like, I've always wanted to matter, right? In a way where I affected the world in a positive way than I came in finding it, right? In lack of better terms, I wanted to be a legend, right? I wanted to be spoken of, right? Like, let's say 200, 300 years from now, Femi Olukoya did this, right? Part of history where my name was going to be kind of like immortalized for something that I did, whether it be selfless, whether it be me finding out a discovery, you know, in a way. So I feel like I haven't done that yet, right? But in a way, I'm trying to achieve that. Not to be selfless and selfish, I'm trying to achieve it, but I want to achieve it in a way where it's beneficial for my immediate surrounding community environment. You know, I don't want to be known as a person that took over, I don't know, South America, right? I don't want to be a tyrant. You know what I mean? I want to be somebody that actually participated in a movement that changed or shifted or pivoted the world into a positive direction. So that's what I want to be a part of. And that's how I want to be seen, as a member of whatever organization that's actually making some type of difference, whether it be minute or major. So, you know, as I grow up, it changes. But off the bat, when I was a kid, I just wanted to be like Caesar. Like, but it changes. So that's where I'm at. That's how I want to be seen.
Yeah, a legend. All right, who else?
I just want to say that's a beautiful desire. Like, I love that. I love that in your inner kid, that you have that in you. That's beautiful. So I'm just feeling that and appreciating it. I can continue as it goes with me. I think bringing in the child parts of me, wanting to be seen, really be seen and really be loved as who I am. Those are some things that lately I've been working on, is allowing my emotions, allowing my vulnerability to be seen. Because, you know, if the vulnerable parts of me can't be seen, you know, they can't be loved. And I think I'm learning how much it is about community. It's not all about these parts just being loved by me. They're loved by, it's important for them to be loved by self in other people as well. So, do I want to, I'd say, if the core, since, you could boil it down to a core theme, like Femi had, like, just being seen as lovable and valuable, is what comes to mind for me, and what comes to heart, really. That's the feeling that comes up, and how I want to be seen.
Can I just name the fact that I love the fact that you shared that your part needs to be loved by the self of others. Like, just qualifying that is so important, and I appreciate that.
I feel
I guess
seen.
I'll. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. For me, how I want to be seen. I think I always had a propensity towards like sciences, and it's like I oscillated in my like journey between like wanting to be a scientist, but then wanting to like do espionage, like work for the FBI, like want to do some investigating, solving problems, like being very stealth and discreet, but also like fixing something, having the intel, the information, being able to leverage that to like create safety and solve problems. And then I became a therapist. So scientist, spy, you blend the two, boom. And so it may have happened. I don't know. But I actually did have plans. I was like on track to like do the Peace Corps. I was on track to do some other things. And then it was around the time of 9/11, and it just kind of shifted what I felt like was at my fingertips for life. So how do I want to be seen? I think that my natural DNA makeup is artistic. So I have done some spoken word books, and I think that's a huge part of how I'm able to express the things that don't come out in other intellectual fashions. And I've begun to accept the artistic qualities as an outcome of sort of the quality of intellect that I have. And so I see myself as an artist. I see myself science-based, and I also see myself as like a problem solver. I've been a mediator since probably day one, and so that's just something. I guess that's not necessarily how I want to be seen, but that's something I think is like a baseline of my core personhood that I think should be recognized as a part of a mediator, artist, and a problem solver. That's how I would say.
So I'm gonna borrow something from Femi and from Dane regarding how I want to be seen. So for me, like I mentioned earlier, my mom instilled in me that I was special, that I should be special, and I'm significant, and it wasn't necessarily things that she told me directly. Sometimes I would overhear her telling other people, or other, bragging about me to other people. And when I was to think about those things, I'm like, yeah, I am that. She said, yeah, it's Tara, he's so observant. Yeah, I am that. And then I'll start looking at everything and I can see that's that color, and that was, you know what I mean? It would start to impact me. And so, taken from what Dane said, I am a collection of all of my ancestors. Like, they shaped me. My grandfather shaped me, my mom shaped me, my neighborhood shaped me, my aunts, everybody shaped me in many ways. And one thing that I've been able to do is realize how I've been shaped by these figures in my life, from my personality to my humor to the way I connect with people. I've been able to look at old videos and old photos, now having an understanding of IFS, and being able to see parts in old videos from the 90s, right? So if anybody hasn't done this yet, has anybody done this before? Like, look at old videos, and now that you have knowledge of parts, you can see parts in people. You may even see parts in images. I know Duran Young has told me that she's been able to see certain personalities from images. So I've been able to do that. And my goal now, during the pandemic, when the whole George Floyd stuff was happening, I started and I'm coming to age, right, going into my 40s, and I'm coming to age and realizing, what is my life going to be represented? What am I going to do with my life? Similar to what Femi said, like, well, how am I going to be remembered? And I'm in a point now in my life where I feel like I can do something. Like, I have the connections, I have like the wisdom, I understand my true talents now, which wasn't always apparent to me. Now I'm truly understanding those talents. So what can I do that's going to make some real impact? And I have a stronger connection to my people now. And my goals is to do something for my people, Black folks, right? My goal, I want to be seen as somebody who is trying to do something substantial, push the needle forward for us in some way. And I don't think it's something I could do in my lifetime, which is a good thing, because now I can pass the torch to younger folks, right? I'm going to lay a path out, go as far as I can go, and pass that torch to the next generation. So that's how I want to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's a timely question, because it's funny enough, right? Since going through my IFS training, like I've been doing a lot of self work, and I think how I want to be seen, publicly is the same way that I am on a day-to-day basis, right? With boundaries around that are realistic, right? People can't know everything about me, but I think that being seen as like a flawed human being, being seen as somebody who's gonna make mistakes, being seen as somebody who like has anxiety sometimes, or like is overwhelmed, or is scared, or doubts himself, or you know, all of those things that come with like all of the work that I do. But oftentimes the way that I'm seen publicly, even though I try to share some of my struggles and try to share like my story and my history, the way that I'm seen by others in the work that I do and the spaces that I occupy is a lot different than the way that I'm known by folks that are in community with me, or are able to have those, I guess we could say, like back channel conversations with me about what's really happening. So I think I want to have a public image that is as aligned to my real kind of like authentic self as much as possible. Now I think there's two parts to it, right? There's the part of being in integrity with myself, right? Being in integrity with myself and knowing that the way that I'm showing up is authentic and real and genuine, and that I'm not out here talking about healing and talking about, you know, growing and expanding while also having a mask on myself, right? And then I think the other part of that is also like responsibility of not painting a picture for folks, especially you know, BIPOC folks that might want to be in the same career space, or are going through certain struggles in whatever spaces they're in. I feel a responsibility to not paint this picture of like having a perfect life or being this perfect person, because it really then puts pressure on people to have like unrealistic expectations of themselves, right? Or to think that they're not good enough, or to think that they have to strive to a certain ideal to be able to like to accept themselves or to be happy. And so like those are the two important things for me. It's like how am I showing up, and is it really who I am as much as I can be, right? And both in my personal life and in my public life. And then the other side of that is, the way that I'm sharing myself and the way that I'm showing up, is it being conducive to folks having compassion for themselves?
I just want to say I'm loving all of this, man, just because I can relate to each one of them. Like being able to hold space for wanting to be a legend, but also wanting to be seen as somebody who is capable of being loved, right? But also like wanting to move through the world like in stealth, but also do that in purpose, right? But also recognizing that I'm coming with the fullness of like of this body, but everything, the weight of all those that came from before me. And so my listening to y'all, I was thinking about it. The first thing that came up was like, I want people to see me how I see myself. And so like in many cases, I know that I'm what I'm working to do in the world and the type of world that I'm attempting to create, but I want people to see me how I see me. And if they can do that, I guess I'm wondering that, kind of thinking what a person said, maybe then they can be able to hold that space for me. And if they can see the parts of me that are strong, the parts of me that may require a bit more attention or a bit more care, and being able to shift through that in the various ways, even as the different parts come to the surface. And so if people can see me how I see myself, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what's coming up to the surface right now. next question, right? let's see if we can lighten it up a little bit, or maybe delve deeper. Who knows? But and I think we've all alluded to this in different ways. But you know, who do you primarily serve?
Can I be a two for one? Like,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Answer how you feel.
I serve. I feel like I serve a higher being, but at the same time, I also serve my family because that's my source of fuel. So it's like a circular thing for me, where the reason of what I do is what's actually giving me the energy to do it, right? So I'm a religious guy, right? And I'm a very spiritual individual in a way where it's kind of like a hybrid situation where I do believe in God. I believe in a higher power. But I feel like there's more to it, and it's more complex than what basic religions are making it out to be. But what I can also touch, feel, and love is my family, especially the ones that the higher being has allowed me to create. And that in itself is a creation made by a creator through me. So what I see myself serving, who I see myself serving, are those entities. And that's what takes priority. And it spreads out from there, because if you can't take care of that, you can't take care of anything else.
Well, that's real. It's very real. Who's next?
I can lean into the question a little bit. Professionally, you know, I serve private and public clients. And then when you talk about personally and emotionally, I serve my family. What I realized by nature of the work we do for others, service can't be done if you're not serving yourself. I learned that one real quick. I learned that one real quick. If you're not serving yourself, then whatever else you're doing could potentially be self-sacrifice. So I've learned to pause. I've learned to take back the energy, the breath, the time, the intentionality to recalibrate enough that I can actually be grounded and have the foundation to continue the work. That allows me to show up in ways where I can be attentive, so that my wife can be as soft as she wants to be, so she could show up and do the things that affirm her in our relationship, so that way I can see and be attuned to the joy of my child's face, that I could show up in the ways I want to in the other places in the world. So who do I serve? I serve others, but I try now I did a U-turn. We're probably going to talk about that a little later, that terminology. But I did a U-turn to make sure that what I am getting from the world, I can conceptualize it for myself and healthily execute what is needed. So I serve, you know, clients, but I also and first serve myself and my family. And that's kind of the way I found it a good happy medium for me.
Yeah, I think I'm here to serve, you know, I think I'm here to serve humanity, here to serve you know, to show up as my best self, and then to serve those that you know, that can benefit from that service, right? And also you know, seeing others seeing myself reflected in others is really like serving the one, right? Serving the collective. And I think primarily who I serve is Black and brown folks, right? And I think it's that's a consequence of like who I am and my identity and where I grew up and my experiences. And the reality is that when I story tell and when I share myself, those are the communities that are close, that feel closest to my story and that can relate most to the things that I have been through and continue to go through. And so I would say that, Black and brown communities are definitely my focus, and the folks that I serve most directly.
Cool. I'll jump in. So me personally, I serve, that bigger mission that I mentioned earlier. I see that as higher power and my ideas. I was actually having a conversation with some of the guys who were in my group, the group that I help with the relationship. And one of the guys mentioned that he lost his faith in God, some years ago, and he was trying to figure out a way to continue going forward. Like what's going to motivate me through life if that's not there? Has anybody identified any other higher powers they can connect with? And my comment was something along the lines of, if there was a God, then that God would want you to do God's work, right? The miracles that we see in this world happen from people. It's always a person that did it. It's a miracle, but you got it from a person. So if you were to do God's work, what would that be? What would be the cause you would go after? What would be the thing that you would try to solve? What would be the problem that you uniquely able to solve? And I make that my mission. And in the process of making that my mission, it requires me to improve myself, improve my discipline in order for me to be productive, and improve the way I dress in order for me to present the way I want to present, right? Improve the networks and the places I'm around. And that's what my life starts to become because I'm serving that higher mission, right? So that's what I serve. Professionally, I serve guys, who are going through divorce, separation, cheating. These are all demographic of men, all races, all wealth levels, who are going through those situations. I also help young men of color, Black men mainly, to teaching them how to dress well, right? So I build programs for younger men who are in high school, going to college, teaching them how to improve their way of presenting themselves so they can have a head start in their careers, and I, of course, serve my family. My goal is to be a representation of the mission that I'm going towards, right? So in order for me to do that, I have to be an example, which requires me, again, to improve myself in these ways, which is why IFS was so important to me. Like I had to heal myself in order for me to succeed. It wasn't until I started healing myself that I really started succeeding anyway, right? And so now that I realize these things I'm getting, or my whole career is basically me learning something, then teaching those people what I learned, right? I learned how to dress well. I added to my life. I applied it to my life. It transformed my life. Now I help other guys transform the same way. Same thing with the relationships. Same thing with the IFS. And my goal is to use all these skills that I'm gaining and deliver it to my folks. Bring it back home to them because there's some places they can't go to. There's some places they're not invited into. But I want to create a home for my people, and a healthy home. And so I serve my family, my people, and my mission.
Respect. Person?
Yeah, I really admired the depth with which the questions are asked. These are deep questions, and the depth with which they're being received and answered. And what really, the kind of a drop that got waves going for me is Femi's answer in the sense of serving a higher being. And I feel like I have that in common. To give some context with how I feel about that, or how I conceptualize it, which kind of draws from IFS is just the idea that each of us is, self, or has you can see it as a self, but within that self, there are various perspectives within oneself, which we call parts, just a self, like looking through a different lens or from a different perspective. And we can see, even in our heads, there are two different perspectives, two different eyes, and they could have been arguing amongst themselves as far as whose perspective is right. But because they have different perspectives, they're able to see more depth. And so when I see those different perspectives within oneself, and those parts within us also have parts, why wouldn't it be the other way around? Or why wouldn't it be that way, downward as well as upward? So in that sense, we are all different perspectives of of the same consciousness, and which is why we share self, which is why self has these characteristics that are universal. As we serve, so if I'm serving a higher being and I look at my fellow human beings, those are also parts of the self in which I'm serving, or of the higher self in which I'm serving. So, yeah, I, desire, aspire to live my life in which I'm serving that higher being, that higher power, and seeing a reflection of that higher power in myself and those around me. So that would be my answer of who I serve. And yeah, always just staying realistic in the fact that, wow, I could always be doing this better. And have been in periods of my life where I'm looking at that. How could I do this better? So yeah, that's where it is for me.
Man, these are some really, really thoughtful responses, and so I just want to just take a moment to appreciate each of them and the various kind of lenses that we're witnessing right now, and what comes to the surface for each of these guys. If I had to answer the question, I think it would start with family, because I think the part of me that wants to not only be a provider but also be a legend, it's like I'm doing all of this for them to make sure they have the life, right, that they deserve. And to be a man in this regard, I think you got to be able to go out in the world and do certain things to be able to bring things back to your folks, at least in the way that I embody manhood. And so I serve them in this regard, but I think from there I serve the people, right, in this way. And primarily my goal is to serve Black folks in this way, right? If we think of, I think in terms of like these missions or these higher powers, for me, right, when we talk about like something to the effect, I think what Ty was saying, that when miracles happen, people do them, or when you do something egregious towards anyone, I think some people call it sin. Not that I like that language, but you often do that either against somebody else or against, nature in some ways, which should suggest in a very real way the thing that's higher than you is the thing that's across from you. And so in this regard, right, for me, the people are God, because these are the folks whose life I'm looking to impact and to do things on behalf of and with, because you can't do things for people without them. And so doing this alongside with God and from the perspective that I have and from the work that I attempt to do in this world. I think this is a nice little segue into the next question, because we're talking about, right, the importance of who we serve. But if we're doing that with the emphasis on this IFS lens, I think it's important in some ways. It behooves us to talk about the ways in which IFS has impacted our life, right? So if you all could take a few moments, right, just to reflect and share, right, how has IFS impacted your life?
Yeah, I think it's impacted me on several different levels. I think going through the training for me was more of a personal journey than it was about like, as a clinician, you go through these trainings a lot of time, and it's like a lot of times for me in the past, it's been like, I'm gonna go learn this tool that then I can go and like use with my clients. But this training felt to me like it was like I was the tool, right? And going through the training and being able to learn more about myself and my parts and my system, I think then allowed me to show up more authentically, more fully in the world, feeling more confident in myself. How I use the model now, I think I use it on several different levels. Like I use it in my relationships, in my personal relationships. I use it in my work. And I think the way that I conceptualize the work that I do in the policy space, or even when I'm creating art, like I'm a producer and a subject in a film right now that explores the reemergence of psychedelics from the perspective of people of color. I'm also, like, I've been involved in political stuff and I'm involved in policy. So when I look at society and like the global kind of consciousness or even when I'm in a room with a group, I imagine that like these are all parts of myself, right? So like, um, when, for example, whenever you're in a group training or in group, whatever kind of group you're in, you have so many different personalities that are in that, and each one of them brings something out of you. Like you might be annoyed by this person over here who like asks a lot of questions, or like this person over here who gets angry a lot, or like the person that says rude things or whatever it is, right? And so for me, it's like all these people are a reflection of me, right? Because everything that you can recognize in other people is part of you in some way. And so how do I deal with these parts? Like how am I navigating my own parts within my system, and how am I reacting to like these external parts around me? And then I take that and I kind of scale it to the systems that I work with. So like each system is a part for me, and like how do I navigate each system? Where is this system like polarized? Where is it what parts of our society or what have we exiled, and how do we like bring them back out into the conversation and all of those things. So I think for me it's really been a tool of like understanding myself and then like understanding the world in a different way.
I can jump in with that one. So my first IFS session, I believe my first session was with Dick Schwartz. We did a demo back in 2018, I believe it was. And when I did the demo, it was, Duran asked me, can you do this demo? I wasn't really familiar with IFS. I was just doing a favor for her, and like, all right, sure, no problem. I did the demo, and I recognized something about myself during that demo. I recognized that there were some internal dialogue, some battles between myself. There were some polarized parts. And I was like, okay, that was pretty cool. The next time I did an IFS session was with Duran, and during that session, I was able to speak to a part that was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And when I sat with that part, I was in a room that part was in, and I was able to smell the room that part was. I was able to smell the furniture, right? And it was kind of bizarre for me. But after that, the reflection after that session, I was like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. And as I continue my journey, I started to heal from some of the burdens that I have, especially the burdens surrounding the passing of my mom. And that was also one of those. I was unburdened by Dick Schwartz in a demo for the Earlham Summit back in was that last year, 2021, I believe. And so, and when this was happening, I didn't realize that healing was possible in this way. I don't even think I knew what healing was, to be honest. I thought that, time passes by and you be okay with something. That's healing. And that's not the case. And once I got that perspective change, I was like, IFS from every conversation was about IFS now. It's like, yo, this is healing. This is what it is. Because now I'm able to tell stories about things I wasn't able to tell stories about before because of the exiles, the pain that the exiles held. If I tell that story, I might go down a road that might lead to some tears. We don't want to talk about that, so now I'm able to share these stories that I couldn't before. And now I have a language that I can speak to in just regular conversation with people, and they have no idea what IFS is, but I can communicate to them and they'll understand what I mean when I say you have these internal conflicts. Here's what that is. Here's what that, here's how you would understand that. And so it's given me a different perspective on what human is, what a human mind is, and what the potential we have, and because I understand myself better, I understand other people better, because I imagine that their parts are similar to my parts, and my parts are younger versions of me. That's how I see them, right? So I'm imagining that everyone else's parts are very similar to that. Anytime I'm in a conflict with a person, or anytime I can see that a person is in a part, I see a child. And because I see a child, I'm going to have compassion for that person. So it's changed me in that way of how I've seen people, and that's one of the major things that IFS has helped me with.
Like what you said, basically like going back to certain memories, it kind of like hit for me too, because I can also attest to how IFS has affected me. So, growing up, I didn't really have emotions towards really anything. Nothing really impressed me. I was just blah, right? This was like my adolescent years where I was even younger. I couldn't picture a future, right? I would always wonder what I would be like when I was older. As a kid, you're like, I wonder what I'm going to be when I get older. So this takes me back to my relationship with my father. There is none really. I'm still working on it, right? On myself, right? Because I'm coming from a place of pure anger. Pure, in the purest form, rage and anger. And it's going to take a while, right? But when I say this to say IFS has actually allowed me to visit or have that anger part come into place and explain why it's so overbearing whenever that happens. So, and with that anger also comes pride, which I felt like that was the main characteristic, and that is the main characteristic of my father, right? So I saw a lot of my father in that part that I hold, right? And that allowed me to be a little bit more open into what could possibly be in the future with him. But like I said, I'm still working on it. So because right now we don't have a relationship, right? So it's one of those situations where it's a lighter feeling now than it was when I was growing up and all that, because it was one of those situations, if he passed away, I probably wouldn't go to the funeral. That's how dark it was. Or, me thinking the worst things that could possibly happen and me feeling like, how satisfied would I be, But that's when I say that's where that pure anger comes from. So me allowing that type of model, IFS, and sit in it and be like, hey, so how does this anger feel? What's the perspective? What's the abandonment issue that you brought up? What are the things? And my other parts also saying, but you're turning out okay, and you have kids, and and my happy-go-lucky side, just practicing that. That's really helped me lighten up the load in this dark passenger that I have in me when it comes to the pure anger, because I have anger issues, if you can't tell by now from what I'm saying. But yeah, so it's to the point where there was one time that I blacked out. Last time I blacked out, I think I was 17, and I came to, and I kind of put my stepbrother through a wall, and that's when I was like, I should probably join the military. But that's one of those things that's lightened up for me, where it's recent. It's a recent thing where I'm actually creating scenarios where I'm having conversations with the old dude, and I feel like that's a major leap from what I had in me before. So I think IFS has really definitely helped in that part, because it allowed me to bring that part out, to actually expose it and sit in it and actually have a whole conversation with it.
Nah, thanks for sharing that, yo. Mm-hmm. Appreciate you bringing that.
I'll share that. My initial engagements with IFS, this entity of which I wasn't that familiar, it was really tender. Obviously I know my own life story, but there were so many protectors. In addition to there being so many protectors, I also had a lot of self-like parts that allowed me to function. So, for instance, being able to do things well, productivity, athleticism, these things were part of my story. And then becoming disabled at 35 or 36 completely shifted my reach and my access to what I thought I was supposed to be able to do. So you hold this pain, holding this disappointment, holding the shame about what I can and can't do now, and what effectiveness, productivity, and success and ability looks like. So having to go back down to the baseline of reframing, like, what on earth is the actual need right now? And IFS allowed me to sit with, in a consensual way, those parts that didn't necessarily want to be bothered or messed with or moved, because we're functional. We're brick and mortar over here. Like, don't move me. You move me, you're going to find out what the structure really looks like. And I didn't want to find out. Don't move these joists. So there was a lot of trepidation built up in my system around trying to work with these parts. Because the parts are like, yeah, you good, don't worry about it. and really, you have to ask yourself the question again. You have to continue to revisit. Like a cousin who you're maybe not that familiar with. It's like, okay, we know we family, we know you here, but how do we engage? We got to build that relationship. And that's what my process was like with IFS, is building that relationship to the extent where I could figure out what was wrong, where I could actually trust myself to hold it and not just cope and not just make it and not just take one on the chin and not just swallow it whole. Like, that's not what we built for. That's not what we're here for. And if I wasn't healed, then where was I hurting? That was the biggest piece for me. If I'm not healed as a clinician, as a quote unquote powerful person, then where exactly was I hurting? I had to slow the process down, and the model does that, like I said before, consensually. So you're able to engage as you're able with the parts, with the brokenness, with the missing pieces, with attachment, with missed opportunities, with hurt. And to be able to reimagine some of the experiences that I've had with more power, with more clarity, with more compassion, with more communication, completely redesigned my experience with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
I feel really moved by what all of you have shared. The analogy that comes to mind is that IFS as a method is kind of like a psychedelic in and of itself, and I think that effect is through, in that it allows you to go to vulnerable places. And I think, when it's there, the magic is really in that self to self connection between a clinician and a client, and of course between any individual and their parts. And that love, that compassion does soften places that are hardened. For me, when I encountered IFS for the first time, I was in residency, and I had been going through depressive episodes since I was in high school, and to the level of suicidality, and when I encountered IFS, it really enabled me to see this depression as a part of me. And that's nothing, that's nothing new. It's like a commonplace story in IFS is that, after I encountered IFS, I was no longer depressed. I had depressed parts. I had parts who came up in the future who felt depressed, but I really, for a long time, never identified as being in a depressive episode. And so knowing those aspects of me, knowing where they, examining where they come from, examining, what things in life have impacted me, growing up, like being in, being in classrooms where people are conditioned to believe and treat me as though they're better than me, and me really not knowing that at the time. You know, how that affects one's self-esteem or how they look at themselves, for example. But you know, we all have our things that we've been through, man. I don't necessarily feel like I have that unique story. It feels like a typical IFS story to me, to have a challenge and look at it as a part, and to embrace those parts of myself and to love them. As Ty said, which helps me to love other people and their parts. As a clinician, because I was in a learning process as I encountered IFS, it's like, oh, wow, this is a very elegant and accessible way of understanding human beings and who we are. And it helped everything else that I was learning in residency about other forms of psychotherapy. Everything began to make sense pretty readily, and just made me, I feel a lot of confidence in myself as a clinician because of IFS, and how versatile it is and how applicable it is to every situation. You take it's like Legos. You know, my favorite toy when I was little. You know, you take simple building blocks, but you can do the most complex things with them. And can also see how, you know, taking and using other tools with those, psychedelics or, you know, somatic experiencing, for example, just like breaking things down, like breaking these parts and relationships down to like the pure raw sensation of them, and really becoming connected with them in one's body. There's just so much that you can do with it in terms of healing oneself, but in terms of understanding the world and relating to other people, seeing the self in other people. You know, even when their parts are like way up in front, you can see the, like Ty said, seeing the child in the person that you're with. Has helped with intimacy with myself, you know, emotional intimacy with myself and emotional intimacy with other people as well. That's what I've got.
Sorry. Nah, just a quick add in terms of that, like, it's just, I think the first time I came into contact with it, I was able to go home that day and recognize that I'm feeling anger, but I'm not angry. And I think that was the beginning of this almost recursive space where I can take steps back away from and begin to like see the parts. And I mean, it's been transformative in this way in terms of my ability to be reactive, especially in relationships that matter most to me. And it's also been something that is giving me the opportunity to not only just sit with myself, man, but also not just reimagine things, but I don't know. I guess I don't want to reuse the word intimacy with myself, but it's giving me, I'll just say, space, man, and not to belittle space, but to think of space in almost the best way, like spaciousness. I can't stress that enough in terms of the ways that when I became cognizant of how my system constricts, especially when it doesn't want to touch something, especially when something's inside of me, like it tries to get smaller or get tighter. But I think either recognition, kind of the idea that like the things that I'm trying not to touch aren't going anywhere. And so then what happens then, you know, has in being able to sit with that and kind of mixing spaciousness with the acceptance of things not leaving, right? Like the non-judgmental piece, I've experienced kind of ebbs and flows in my ability to express that or demonstrate that with myself. But being intentional about spaciousness and then touching the things that don't want to be touched, or that my system doesn't necessarily want to touch, giving room. I think even in the space, like kind of I like the idea of like it being its own psychedelic, but then the addition, like if I like if I choose to engage in like a gummy or two, but in using that as a framework to now kind of sit with myself for the rest of the night, and then giving myself that space to sit with emotions that I would not necessarily want to sit with or have the same capacity to sit with in the same way on a regular basis. So I don't know, man. It's like I said, man. It's giving me room to be with the people that I love the most in ways that I was not even aware that I was being destructive to them or being harmful to them. And I think that has been like the most life-giving piece in terms of my own personal life, because the people that I love the most, I want to build up. And I was finding out that I wasn't always doing that. And I was doing harm in ways that I thought I was being helpful. And even when I was attempting when I was attempting to navigate this, I didn't have the tools. I think that's what on a baseline it was been transformative. Like, this is a toolkit that I didn't grow up with that has now given me the framework and the ability to be with people and to be with myself in ways that that not only that I wish I knew before, but the ways that I wish folks like myself I knew who didn't grow up with this before had the capacity to do. Golly, man. I did not expect these questions to be doing this to everybody. So, if you gotta take a breather, take you one. But I'm also recognizing that, just wanted to make sure we're being mindful of time. And so I think we're going to ask a few more pointed questions before we wrap. And so I want us to think about what has it been like for us to bring IFS into our communities, right? How have our communities responded to us bringing this modality, bringing this way of life, this particular disposition to the world into these spaces that we have called home, or we felt comfortable in, or the places that are representative of the highest forms of culture as we understand them, in terms of what it means to be ourselves amongst the folks that we grew up with and that we come from.
I'll jump in. So the first time I was in my level one, my first level one, I remember going to my aunt. My aunt is in her 60s, and I love her like a mom, right? And I told her I was in this training, and I was so happy that I was able to explain what IFS is and what I was learning. And while I was explaining it to her, she was like, yeah, I do that too. Sometimes I'll be looking in the mirror and telling myself certain things. I tell myself I shouldn't drink. I tell myself I shouldn't do this. And, and it's funny, that same day, as I started explaining what an exile is and explaining my exile, and, and then connecting that to how I was as a younger child, how I was more quiet and, especially around that part of my family, my father's side of the family. And she ended up telling me I'm going to tell you something that only one other person in this world know, and she told me this horrible thing that happened in the family, and a part of me was just honored that just that small conversation was allow her to open up about that exile that she had, and so, for me, it became a language to like understanding ourselves, because it's certain things that she was trying to kick and she wasn't able to kick it. And I explained to her what a firefighter is, as terms, when it comes to IFS language. And so it made a lot more sense to her what she was experiencing. And so from that conversation, I was like, when I get fully trained, we can do a session. She was like, she would do that. Because she recognized that what I was talking to her about was about herself. Like, I wasn't trying to tell her what's wrong with her. I wasn't trying to give any medication. I wasn't trying to, and she knows me and loves me, So for me introducing IFS to my people has been like, they know me already. They know who I am. They love me already. They already trust me. And when I come in now, being able to talk about things that they knew happened with me and to me, being able to talk about these things in a way that I can explain how I can truly now explain what I was going through when I was going through these challenging times, And so for me, it's just been like, I can't wait I'm doing this on a larger scale, right? Because in the spaces that I'm in, even when it's, professional spaces, like introducing this to a professional space, when I just share something simple, like instead of you saying you're angry, you say a part of me is angry. Just understand it and then giving the explanation of why that's important is to see things that way and see yourself in that way. And the transformation of them using that and then coming back telling me how amazing it was the week that they used that language to describe what they was experiencing is like phenomenal. It's one of those things where I can't wait to share it to the people that I am around and have influence over or have influence and impact, because especially when it comes to young people, like Philip said, we have tools now that we didn't have before. And the environments that we live in, being Black folks, it's impossible for us not to go through a lot of issues, right? Just from, and we all have similar things. We all went through similar situations, regardless of how much money we had when we were kids, regardless of, where we lived, we had similar experiences. And now being able to use these tools to kind of almost realign ourselves, right? And in that process of realigning ourselves, we start experiencing our own genius in many ways. Like we start like being in touch with parts of us that was trying to scream out, that was trying to do something great, parts of us that we feel like we were holding ourselves back. Why am I keep holding myself back? That was a part that you wasn't listening to. Now we starting to understand these things, and is one of those things where we're introducing people to themselves, even though they thought they knew themselves. Like I said, my aunt is in her 60s. You know what I'm saying? And now for the first time, just that small conversation, she was able to understand a part of herself that she was unable to do. And this is me talking to her in her bedroom, not in the therapy chair or something along those lines. So I think it's been a huge impact, and it will be a huge impact as we start to develop our skills and start to create content and create, other just stuff like this that we're doing now to just showcase, what IFS is doing for us and how it's being applied to our daily life and daily thinking.
Nice. It's good. It's good. I also want to piggyback on that, how it's helped me. It's particularly, and it's what I went into IFS to actually do, and I didn't realize it was going to help as much as it did when it comes to psychedelic therapy, right? Because I'm usually kind of like, I wouldn't say wing it per se when it comes to integration after the treatment, but IFS is also something that I've used in, talking to my clients after they have had their treatment. And it's a really good playbook, because it's one of those situations where what these terminologies are, what they mean. There's like the parts that are coming up for you, like the firefighter, the exile. Like you can say those things, and when they ask you, "Oh, what does that mean?" Well, this is what it means, and this is how this pertains to what you saw in your journey and why you're fighting this and why this is affecting that. So how do we bring those parts up after this session? And so just basically just to say that it's helped me be a little bit more structured in my integrations, and it's given me a lot more confidence, because it's tricky when you're integrating with people, because they have different journeys, so you have to figure out, okay, how can I help this person understand or unpack what it is that came up for them. And practicing IFS, and I'm still learning. I only did the first level, so it's one of those things where it's helped me create a more stable way of integrating, to where it can be measurable for the client and understand where we're going with this. And that's for the most part, that's how it's really, really helped me with my practice. And when I sit and do these preps and integrations with clients.
Yeah, man, I feel like I've gotten a lot of love, man. Like from people around me, like my tribe, the people that I connect with. often, and I'm seeing the response to the way that I'm showing up in different spaces. Um, and for the most part, right, it's a positive. It's a kind of like love for the authenticity and love for the things that I am now able to name that maybe other people want to name and they don't have the words for it, or they haven't, or they're scared to do it, right? And so for me, it's I feel like I've always had an impact when I show up, right? I had a lot of mentors when I was younger that used to tell me like, yo, you have a presence about you when you walk into a room, but you don't recognize that, right? And as I've been able to like bring my parts more into balance and learn my system, and I'm able to now have the space to let these other parts of myself see like, yo, like you really out here like doing your thing, and like, and people are receptive to that, and like these parts of me that had been kind of hiding before are starting to come to the forefront, and I'm feeling um like it's being well received by the people that I care about how I'm received by, right? So um I feel like it's been a positive response, man, and it's been like I feel like I'm being invited into more and more spaces to just kind of share myself.
I'll keep the ball rolling. If delivered properly, I think that IFS treatment can increase self-awareness. If integrated over the long term excellently, then it could actually lead to self-acceptance, more self-acceptance. And I think that that's the overall goal. When working with marginalized populations, uh, culturally, socioeconomically, uh, all the different kind of benchmarkers of intersections, there may be, imagine being in, a family where the contentions are high and things are very visceral in the home, and your parts may not allow you to even want to speak the truth of what's happening around you out of fear of lack of safety, and that can challenge your ability of help seeking. When utilizing IFS, when explained in a consensual engagement, you don't necessarily all the time have to use lengthy words to affect change. So I found when words aren't readily accessible, we can track body too. We can get into the body. And that's it's great to have a modality where you can have both the talk, but you can also do some body work. And being able to help a client understand that what their body is doing is language is has often been revealed to me as a very fascinating experience, something they've never experienced before. Nervousness, psychosomatic symptoms, how and when they might sweat, how their body feels, the temperature. All these things are indicators of the different parts. And if they're not able to speak or to identify those parts, even just being able to track the body and movement can be so effective in helping them gain some traction around their internal family, their internal system, their internal working. And it gives more, I prefer to use the term personal dominion rather than self-efficacy or agency, because those are like performative metrics, and I think that personal dominion is self-explanatory. It gives you more command over what's happening with you. And I think that, especially as a person of the global majority, that that's what I aim for. I aim for personal dominion in many facets of my life, and to be able to offer that to the people I serve has been extremely valuable. Being able to help guide them, being able to help create language, that communication. Now they can have these conversations independently to develop that relationship, so that the need of an exile, so that the need of a harmed part, so that the need of an isolated part can be attended to properly, with care, responsibly. And it's a very affirming experience to watch a client gain that sense of personal dominion and create that relationship with themselves when they had previously been either dissociated or very distant from the experience that had harmed them.
So I think about this question, how has my community responded to me when I bring IFS to them? So I'll put it this way: my family is one layer of my community that I grew up with, and of course, when I encounter IFS, I don't go home and proselytize, but I'm sure they're probably like, Percy's a little bit more chill. He's able to, he's able to relate better. He's more vulnerable. He's more curious. So I feel like that, I haven't said, hey, this is what I do. And I'd like to use this with you. I've done some sessions with my sister. And she was like, Percy, she was like, Percy hypnotized me. And now I'm not, she had no idea what I was doing. Like, Percy hypnotized me, and now I'm not afraid of riding on roller coasters anymore and stuff like that. So it was really, we've done some things, and I think the family that's close to me has recognized like how much of an influence it has on me. I did, when it comes to community, there's a lot of effort, in terms of bringing IFS. I think, when Duran first invited people from the IFS community, that was me and Nancy Sowell. And that was just a beautiful experience seeing, that's with Black Therapist Rock, and seeing, wow, like, damn, like, I'm so proud of this group of people. And was really delighted to be able to present IFS to them and the impact that it had on me, and to be connected to BTR since. That being said, like I'm not sure what communities everyone in here grew up in. I grew up in white community, so there's been then of course that has impact, and it also makes it there's a sense of relief in connecting with Black community in that way, because it's like, I didn't have this growing up, other than my family, which is large, and grateful for them. It's been recent, and actually a real gift to be able to connect with Duran and with Black Therapist Rock, and just reconstitute this part of myself that is very, very important and very precious to me. I guess that's how that question impacts me and what comes up. I'll be honest, like I feel like as I answer it in that way, I'm working on being more vulnerable. So just wanting to share what's real for me.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you all for going into that and just kind of sharing how folks have received you, right? I think my folks have been pretty receptive. They've always been kind of curious about, like, what do you do over there? It's always kind of interesting when my parents tell me that people ask what does Philip do? And he's like, machines and neuroscience and spirituality, stuff like that. And so, but my brother has done an IFS demo with me, and like he was like, man, lead me through a meditation. Like he's very curious about that, and my folks are very receptive, and so, and then my wife is she's at first when I was doing like the training, she was like, let me know when it starts so I can go in the other room or not be around that night, because I think when I first was like in BTR and kind of like it was emotional, like I was feeling big feelings, and so she was like, man, just let me know so I can go somewhere else that day. But it's shifted though, and I think that they're interested in, and I definitely am incorporating it with my boys, right? Like from the early ages, like, asking them, like, if they when they have big feelings, how do they feel about these feelings, and where do they feel them at, and what is the impulse, or what is the emotion, and kind of recognizing that our parts have good intentions for us, and so kind of giving them these skills from these ages so that they can grow up with this kind of spatial awareness of this internal space and external space and those relationships. So yeah, I think this is just kind of being very intentional about that. So I'm grateful to hear the various ways that folks have kind of opened up to you, and the way that you've been able to share that in whatever capacity that is, because I think it's everybody's context is so specific to them that everybody's answer is definitely gonna be way different. So without further ado, I think it's time for us to wrap. Thank you all for attending this conversation, for witnessing the space that we've been able to hold for one another, and for all of the comments and conversation that we've had in the chat as this thing has been going along. We hope that you've been able to see the various, not the various, but various ways in which Black and brown men show up, given that we have these 6 men on this panel today, and are able to peer into not only the ways that we present ourselves, but the ways in which we hope to not only be a part of this community, but are already a part of this community, and the ways in which we will continue, right, to be here and expand on the work as well. And so thank you for your time. Looking forward to engaging folks further, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Philip, I hope you can just see you're essentially getting a standing ovation in the chat.
Well, thanks. No, and thanks everyone for taking the time, out your day. You could have skipped this panel, but you didn't. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for all your questions and all your kind words. And just really grateful, to be able to have this conversation, and then, add this, to the conference this weekend. So enjoy the rest of your time, everyone. Thanks so much again.